Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel with yet again another review coming out of the Toronto International Film Festival. And this one is a big film that I could not wait to talk about, and now it is finally here. Today I'm going to be talking about Luca Guadagnino's Queer, starring Daniel Craig, Drew Starkey, Leslie Manville, Jason Schwartzman, and Henry Zaga. And this follows an American expat named Lee living out his days in Mexico in the late 1940s as he drinks, trips himself out, and falls for a young Navy sailor named Allerton. And this movie, of course, is based on the William S. Burroughs novel Queer, and also, I believe, Junkie. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But this is very much a autobiographical tale of William Burroughs' life in Mexico in this period of time in which the story is taking place. And obviously the screenwriter here, Justin Kuritzkis, who obviously just got off of Challengers with Luca Guadagnino, which is, as you know, one of my absolute favorite movies of the year, as I think I can speak on behalf of most people. So the expectations for this movie were incredibly high. And I certainly thought that this was going to be one of the absolute best movies I saw at TIFF. That was until we saw the reactions coming out of Venice, which were divisive to say the least, but still net positive. So I was, pretty excited to watch this movie after hearing the bizarre lengths of which it goes by the end of the third act. And to be honest, there is so much of this that is just absolutely stunning. I think for the first 2/3 of this movie, I think this is some of Luca Guadagnino's finest work. I think what he captures here in the first half of Queer is some of the most innovative and sensual filmmaking I've seen in a long time. And the thing that's so amazing about Luca Guadagnino, right, is he is such an adept director where he kind of fits into any specific movie and adapts to the style of what that movie should be. It's never one specific sort of trick that Guadagnino has, or specific feel or tone or mood. It very much is dependent on the story he's telling, and like that, he slips so seamlessly behind the camera into the director's seat, and it's just absolutely stunning to see his work as a filmmaker. I think he continuously evolves in so many different ways from each movie to movie, and I think that's no different here with Queer. And I certainly think that this is a good combination, him and Kuritzkis, but also I think throwing Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross into the mix for the score is another great teaming for this group. And I think obviously the soundtrack is very different here from the one in Challengers. This is a little bit synth driven, but it's much more beautiful and contemplative and just absolutely stunning in so many ways. There's a lot of beautiful jazzy motifs that pop up during this. From my understanding, I remember there being a lot of arpeggiated segments that just absolutely rang so beautifully in my ears. And I really appreciate the work that they've done on these past two Guadagnino films here. And that really definitely lends to the very atmospheric environment of late 1940s Mexico, which is just captured so beautifully on film here. And I think the production design from that standpoint is really spot on for the era, which is really interesting in juxtaposition with a lot of the musical choices that pop up, because with Luca Guadagnino, a lot of his soundtracks, are absolute heaters, Challengers included, and I think the way he utilizes certain, more contemporary songs, like Nirvana's Come As You Are, or a lot of Prince tracks, believe it or not, are so well utilized emotionally for this story at some really brilliant moments. And there's even this contemporary cover of All Apologies to kick off this movie, I believe. And I thought it was a very striking choice, a lot of the musical decisions here. Now, I will say not all of them work, because I'm not really a huge fan when movies take a song that wasn't from that period and place it in the actual diegesis of the film. And that happens quite a few times here. And just being a history person when it comes to music and that sort of stuff, it does bother me a little bit because it doesn't really make much sense to me. But besides the point, I can, nitpick that as much as I want to. It's just a small issue for me. But really, let's get into the story here, the acting. I mean, my goodness, this story does not work without Daniel Craig as Lee in what I think is a tour de force performance and the absolute finest work that he has done in his entire career. This is not what I would consider a very showy performance, but it is quite a transformative one, and at moments very quietly devastating. There's this one shot that just pushes in on Craig's face that I will never forget. This is one of the absolute finest performances you are going to see for the rest of the year, and I think it would be absolutely criminal if Craig does not get his first Oscar nomination for this film, because he truly deserves it. And of course, it's not the end-all be-all for Craig. We all know he's a tremendous actor. But it really would be an absolute shame if the Academy missed out on nominating him for this stellar career best performance, if you ask me. He carries this movie on his back and then some, and I really, really am just astounded by Craig's work here. And I also think playing off him so wonderfully is Drew Starkey, who is a bit of a newcomer to the scene as the very elusive and caged Allerton, who really is not as much infatuated with Lee as Lee is infatuated with him. And I think Drew Starkey plays this distance so perfectly. He captures so well what the script is going for with this character and his relationship to Lee. And I think some of the scenes that they have together, my goodness, look, I'm fairly certain I'm straight, but even watching this movie, I was like, damn, this is hot. Like, my goodness, people talk about challengers being very sexually driven, but like, he really goes there with this movie, and he doesn't shy away from showing the full intimacy of their encounters. And it is just really, really splendid, the work that they do together, the scenes that they have, and what their relationship means to each other, considering what their characters are going through internally. It really is such a great match. And also Jason Schwartzman, I gotta give a big shout out to, who is one of the guys who hangs out at the gay bars with Lee down in Mexico. He is almost unrecognizable in this, but he is so constantly funny. Every time he steps on the screen, you know you're going to get a laugh. And it is just one of the most interesting performances I've ever seen Jason Schwartzman given. So big props to him, but also Leslie Manville in this. Oh my goodness. Like, this is one of those performances where the movie ended, and then I'd say about 20 minutes after, probably even more than 20 minutes after the movie ended, I was like, wait, that was Leslie Manville? Like, I did not even realize she was in the movie, because this is an absolute balls-to-the-wall performance when she shows up in the latter half of this movie. And my goodness, we got to get into that, because that's really what's splitting a lot of people on this film, is how out there and bizarre the third act is. Because the first part of this movie is just this really beautiful and sensual love story between these two men, and more so very much a character study of a very self-destructive man, which is Lee, aka William Burroughs. And I do love seeing, what he has to go through, his vice with heroin and alcohol, and just how he goes about his interactions on a day-to-day basis. You really get to know the character of Lee inside and out. And I really think that whole segment of the film is absolutely stunning. I'd say one of my favorite movies of the year. But as you move along into the third part of the movie, where he's essentially going into the heart of the desert to look for ayahuasca, and yeah, it gets pretty trippy, I'm not gonna lie. And it kind of gets to 2001 levels of surrealism by the end of this film. And yeah, it's really trippy and very, very different from the rest of the film. And I think as the story moves along as well, you could definitely feel that this was cut down to a 2-hour and 15-minute movie. I believe it was somewhere closer to 3 hours in the original cut. And you do feel a lot of gaps in the story, which was really a disappointment because I was really loving so much of this movie. But even with that being said, I think Sayambu Mukdipram's cinematography here is still just as splendid and visually alluring as it was in the first half. There's a lot of really interesting gels you can see being used to, color the hues of this film. And it's very, very different from Challengers, which I think is so innovative in so many other regards when it comes to the cinematography. But still, I think the work he does here is splendid, and it really adds to a lot of the surrealism that enters the movie by the end of the film. And with the cinematography, there's some amazing overlays that happen with Daniel Craig's Lee trying to reach out and touch something that perhaps seems a bit inaccessible to him. And it really adds to the surrealism in a way that still feels grounded. And I really, really love those moments in the movie because I've never seen anything quite like it. And I think it adds yet again to my argument about Luca Guadagnino doing some really, really interesting things from a directorial standpoint. But even considering that it feels like a completely different film, as I said, I think the unity in the direction and all the technical aspects of this film really do make it still stand out for me in some way. And I also think that I really do deeply appreciate and understand what the story is going for, what is saying about Lee as a character, especially by the end when it really just goes to, completely unhinged levels, we'll say, that really aren't indicated by the first part of this movie at all. And those are some of my biggest issues with the film, but even with that being said, you gotta give it to Guadagnino because he's always doing something very interesting and very off the beaten path of what he's done in the past. And I really, really love that about Luca Guadagnino. He's probably becoming one of my favorite filmmakers as of late. I mean, all his movies that I've seen, I've really enjoyed or loved, whether it be Call Me By Your Name, Suspiria, Challengers, you name it. He's got it in the bag. And I really do think that this is probably one of his better films as of late. I mean, I like it a bit more than Bones and All, but let's be honest, it's nowhere near Challengers level. And when it comes to the Oscars, I honestly think Challengers has a better shot at being nominated for, let's say, original screenplay or score or what have you. But I do think this could get one lone nomination for Daniel Craig here because I really do hope that the Academy doesn't snub him just because of how strange this movie is, because that would really be a disservice to Daniel Craig's performance in this movie, which is absolutely worthy in so many regards. I really love what he did in here, and I really love a lot of what Luca Guadagnino did here, even if it doesn't hit the entire time. What is there, as I said, is so beyond fresh and inventive and just absolutely lush and beautiful and intimate. I could say so many things about Queer, and I really do want to see it again, despite all I said. I don't know if I necessarily love this movie, but I love massive, massive parts of this film. And for that, I'm going to give Queer an 8 out of 10. Really, really solid entry into the growing filmography of Luca Guadagnino and A24's library. I'm really excited to see what they do with this for the rest of the year. I hear it's coming out in November, so look forward to that. Definitely by December, you'll all be seeing it in theaters, or so I hope. But definitely check this one out. This comes at a very high recommendation from myself. And let me know what you thought about Queer if you've seen it already. And please smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more movie reviews like this. We are getting closer and closer to the end here of my reviews coming out of the Toronto International Film Festival, with my next one being Crocodile Tears, a new entry into the canon of Indonesian cinema, and I'm very excited to talk about that one. And until then, you guys take it easy and keep watching movies while you're at it.